Time binding, the transmission of symbols and tools across generations, begins on the third circuit, acute consciousness. Time is, however, intensified on the first circuit. This only refers to the silly and inferior religions of other people, of course, and has no reference to the sublime truth of the reader's own religion. The principles function on the social sexual circuits in the higher primates is to form an adult personality, a parent. By definition, the parent is one who cares for young and the species by genetic necessity. The parent also cares about the young. In symbolizing humans, this means planning, hoping, and having aspirations. In the language of mystics, this means being attached and trapped on the wheel of karma. The first effort in most mystical traditions is to break this fourth circuit's attachment by making a vow of celibacy. The first circuit is located in the left neocortex, the newest part of the left hemisphere of the brain. It is linked neurologically with the genitalia and the breasts, fucking, hugging, embracing, protecting circuitry. Persons who take their heaviest imprint on these circuits are beautiful. That is, the entire body has received so many sexual neurotransmitters from the brain that they are constantly radiating the attractive mating signals that make up our perception of what is beautiful in human being. According to action of imprinting, they can be called the calculating exploiter, totally repressed Puritans, or carry some other negative traits, but they always look alike. Send the signal of the ideal fucker lover protector. Once formulated, morality serves as not only a check on genetic drift but a brake against circuitry innovation. Homosexuality, like left-handedness, is probably included in the genetic script to serve auxiliary function. In most primitive societies, the homosexuals and the left-handed are shunned in the shamanic roles. In more complex societies, they are like spinster and heterosexual bachelors, usually shunned into intellectual or artistic roles, which have quasi-shamanic functions of making, breaking, or transforming cultural signals. Those who claim any perennial sexual variations is against nature are underestimating nature's variety, diversity, and economy. The mutation of Leonardo da Vinci, a left-handed homosexual, was needed to break up the signal of the dying medieval reality tunnel and remake our perceptions in the reality tunnel of the fact that a Leonardo painting is still the norm of what we mean by realism. And most people, including right-handed heterosexuals, are living in scientific humanist space this man invented. The shamans, priests, etc. divine which ideas are moral and which are immoral. Anything new, anything that will break the tribal cycle, take us out of cyclical mythic time into linear, progressive, evolutionary time, is usually defined very quickly as immoral. To say that religion and priestcraft have played a conservative role in history is an understatement. One might as well say that bubonic plague has killed a few people, or that Hitler was a little bit strange. The chief role of religion has always been reactionary. This is evolutionary function and the dialectic of the circuitry of the brain. Circuit 3, unchecked, is like a cocaine monologue. You can't remember anything because everything is changing too fast. This is profoundly disorienting to the average domesticated primates. So the tribal moralists keep stability and tranquility by acting as decelerators. The average person, similarly, is philosophically most open and curious before the adult sex role of parenthood is elected. After reproduction, there is little time for circuit 3 speculations, and because of the sanctions every tribe places upon heresy in new ideas, there is also little inclination. Thus, circuit 3 tends to take us out of tribal cyclical time into linear progressive time, but circuit 4 loops us back into the cycle again. Homosexuals might or might not be the chief creators of cultural innovation, as some gay pride advocates claim, but it is certainly true that they have done more than their share. The reason they are not trapped into parent roles. These four circuits are coded in for permutation of each into the chord cards of the tarot deck. Thus, the Knight of Disc representing Earth according to the occultist is the pure first circuit type, all sensation, all oral demands, all visceral tonic behind their alchemical, kabbalistic, theosophical jargon. Most books on tarots are describing this type when they discuss this card, the pure, undiluted mama's boy. Socially bad sex, stripe condemned. Socially good sex, stripe approved. Imprinting social sexual circuits. A and B represent socially good and socially bad sex according to the tribe. A1, A2, and A3 represent individual imprint, personally good sex. What the individual is imprinted to like, and B1, B2, and B3 personally bad. What the individual doesn't like. If axis A1, B1 is only slightly tilted, the individual is fairly normal in that society. If A2, B2 is tilted more, the individual is neurotic in that society. If A3 is B3 is tilted much further, the individual is pervert in that society. The queens of disc or earth water is a mixture of first and second circuit traits, sensational, visceral, tonic, oral, and emotional, egotistic, political. You better be damned careful to call her Mrs. The Prince of Disc or Earth, Air is a blend of first and third circuits, oral, demand, and rational calculation. Probably a very sharp and sharkish lawyer. The Princess of Disc or Earth Fire is first circuits, orality mixed with fourth circuit sexuality. These functions of exhibitionist with inflamed errors means she's probably staring into porn movies. In all this card, the first circuit predominates over the other. The Queen of Cups or water is emotion and territorial demands. Nelson Ogren had her in mind when he said, "Never be down with a woman who has more problems than you." The Knight of Cups, water, earth, is emotion plus sensation. The pure predator, marauder, thief, rapist, or sociopath. The Prince of Cups, or water, air, is emotion plus reason. The humanists, humanitarians, liberal, and ideal Unitarian minister. The Princess of Cups, water, fire, an explosive mixture of egotism and sexuality. Scarlett O'Hara, the femme fatale. The Prince of Swords is air and air, all pure, undiluted intellect. His feet never touch the earth. He lives amid floating abstraction. The monk schooler, the Knight of Swords, the air, earth, reason, and oral exhibitionism. The actor, orator, demagogue, sometimes the artist. The Queen of Swords is air, water, reason plus emotion. The greats is in science and art are generally of this imprint group. The Princess of Swords is air and fire, reason and sexuality. The good parent, usually the Puritan, but sometimes the crusader for sexual freedom. In any case, the motivating drive is an attempt to impose abstract reason upon the genetic imperatives of the mating urge. The Princess of Wands, fire, sexuality are most powerful. These types are usually, but not necessarily, quite promiscuous. Sometimes they pour all their erotic energy into one mate and raise huge families, parenting being a strong part of the fourth circuits. G.S. Batch, who might have written sexiest music in history, had 20 children. Holy shit. The Knight of Wands is fire, earth, sexuality, and sensationalism. The playboy, rich, phallic narcissist. The Prince of Wands is fire and air, sexuality plus reason. These types are likely to get involved in the kind of empirical mysticism that is not tolerated by the local authorities. The Tantrists in India, the Knight Templar, and witches in medieval Europe, Aleister Crowley and Wilhelm Reich most recently. Crowley said this card was a portrait of his true self. The Queen of Wands is fire and water, sexuality and emotional politics. The law courts have steady parade in this type, passing through every day. The clever Kabbalists who designed this pictorial key to the four primitive circuits included a clue to higher consciousness, for they teach that each element in traditional alchemy, earth, air, fire, water, correspond to one of those tarot suits, discs, swords, wands, cups, and to one of the latter in the holy unspeakable name of God, Yahweh. The correspondence as follows. A fire, wands, circuits 4, H, water, cups, circuit 2, V, air, swords, circuit 3, H, earth, disc, circuit 1. The logic of this imagery is quite clear to the unconscious mind, and these associations appear frequently in dreams, as Jung documented in psychology and alchemy. Knight of Wands, Queen of Cups, Prince of Swords, Prince of Disc, Oral Narcissist, Sensation, Natural Child, Adopted Child, Circuitry, Rational Reason, Adult or Computer, Missing in Truth, Circuit 4, Sexual, Missing in Young, Parent, Superego. The aim of the Kabbalah is to make the microcosm mirror on the macrocosm. That is, to make the human being a perfect image of God. This means putting together the fourth alchemical element symbolized by the letter. What the hell? H, YHVH, in other words, bring the four secrets into balance. This is the same lessons as taught in the Buddhist mandalas with four demons at the corner and the circle representing awakening in the middle. The married look, the mom and dad look, etc., which are not scientific concepts, but which everybody can recognize at once, have to do with an acute time sense. The parent is concerned not just with acquiring biosurvival tickets for personal nurture, but with acquiring tickets for the young and for the future. Behaviorists tell us wonderful stories about the intricate pattern that can be conditioned into experimental animals. See, they say we have, by selective reinforcement, trained this rat so that at the sound of a bell, he runs up and later presses button A, races across playing on the ground, another later presses button B, dashes across the cage and waits at the food slot for his meal to arrive. Let's anybody think this book is written from a perch superior to consider the similar but more complex behavior which the author followed out for 20 years. He would set an alarm clock before sleep every night. When the alarm woke him, he would breakfast hurriedly, rush off to catch a bus, ride to a subway, change to a train, ride to an office building, rush to the lobby, board an elevator, ride a certain floor, enter a novice, and toil a repetitious and generally pointless task for 8 hours. This behavior sequence had been shaped, as B.F. Skinner would say, by reinforcement delivered every second Skinner week in the form of biosurvival ticket money. These tickets were necessary to the biosurvival of four dependent children. The reader of this book can probably remember, somewhat dimly, the imprinting and conditioning of each of these circuits. We all began as infants in one-dimensional world, orally hooked to mommy. The further away from mommy we crawled, the greater was our biosurvival anxiety, and we generally returned to mommy as quickly as possible. The key imprint incident of this period, together with its associated conditioning, determine concretely how much we currently exhibit of anxiety or self-confidence, rootedness or explorativeness, dependency or independence. Then, when the DNA sent the appropriate RNA messenger molecules to the gland, endocrine system, etc., a mutation occurred. Our gross morphology, our whole body changed, and our minds changed in the process. That is, our reality tunnel dilated into 2 dimensions, and we rose up and began to walk about the house and started learning who we could dominate, who could dominate us, who could be dominated, emotionally bullied or at some times and not at others, etc. We develop out of amorphous bio-survival consciousness into stubborn individual ego. We were imprinted and conditioned with a particular style of emotional territorial politics. At this stage, we were imprinted and conditioned for dominance or submission, self-confidence, self-doubt, strong ego, weak ego, high pack status, low pack status, giving orders, taking orders, heroin moral or sclaf moral. We were subsequently conditioned to switch between these reflexes depending on whether the person we were dealing with was higher in the pecking order or lower in the pecking order. Middle class people, e.g., Reagan Confession, George Birchers, etc., will always revere those higher in the pecking order and equally will always have some reason to persecute back at the poor who are lower in the pecking order. Hence, they will say and even believe that they are being robbed by the poor on welfare who get about 4% of the tax dollar and never notice that the military industrial complex is getting 72% of their tax dollars. This is normal mammalian sociobiology. After this second circuit, reality tunnel is wired in. The organism molds and mutates again into the verbal stage and a third circuit style of mentation imprinted that is on top of protoplasmic consciousness and mammalian ego. We acquire a human mind, which is created by and creator of human artifacts and speech. Feral children who survive in isolation from human society, artifacts and speech have no minds in the human sense, which is why they are called feral. In the semantic stage of imprint vulnerability, we acquire either fluency or inarticulateness, dexterity or clumsiness, good mind or dumb mind. Why do we say dumb, mute, for stupid? Because a good mind means a good mouth. The human mind is verbalizing circuits. Oh, makes sense. At puberty, another DNA trigger fires and RNA messenger initiates another morphological mutation of body mind. The adult personality is imprinted or conditioned. We become moral or immoral, robot obedient or robot disobedient, solid citizen or sexual outlaw, parents or anarchists. Lack of understanding of these morphological changes and their persistence in imprint circuits in the brain is responsible for most failures in communication and for general sense of exasperation with which we too often confront each other. Since everybody's imprint are a little bit different, the average is that which nobody totally is. James Joyce justified anarchism on the ground that the state is concentric and the individual is eccentric. We all feel at times like the legendary Quaker who told his wife, "All the world is mad but me and they and me and you, and sometimes I wonder about you." You, they, what the hell? Richard's disciples for the Dr. Spock and Summerhill School, etc. We called intention with some impatience and the brutality and stupidity of many of our traditional child rearing methods. These methods are brutal and stupid only if, like the above mentioned heretics, or one regards the goal of child rearing as the production of sane, balanced, creative, not created, human being. This has never been the goal of any society in the real world. The traditional child rearing methods are quite logical, pragmatic, and sound in fulfilling the real purpose of society, which is not to create an ideal person, but to create a semi-robot who mimic the society as closely as possible, both in its rational and irrational aspect, both as repository of the wisdom of the past and sum of total all cruelties and stupidities of the past. Very simple. Totally aware, alert, awakened, unbrainwashed person would not fit very well into any of the standard roles society offers. The damaged robotized products of traditional child rearing do fit into those slots. That is, there is a neurosociological logic to the illogical. Traditional schools, very much like mini prisons, today's civil imagination cram the child physically and mentally and run a various form of overt or covert terrorism. Of course, the answer is unambiguous yes, but such schools are necessary to train people for roles in the ordinary office or factory of professions, which are also very much like mini prison, stifle imagination, cram person physically and mentally, and run on terror, threat of loss of bio-survival tickets in the form of paychecks or tenure. The permissive movement in child rearing appeared only when it did, and has succeeded only to a limited extent, because society has always needed and still think it needs human robots. Utopian child rearing will advance further, necessarily only as society itself evolves out of authoritarianism. That is, as the accelerated changes now occurring propel us into the most rapid period of social evolution in all human history. We will then need citizens who are not robots, who are creative, who are not docile, who are innovative, who are not narrow-minded bigots, who are explorers in every sense of the word. Traditional child rearing began to falter only when society began to enter into the present period of accelerated change and technological omni-transformation of all traditional values. Failures in communication generally derive from the sending a message to the wrong address. That is, your husband has an ego problem and you send a message to his mind, adapting a diagram for transactional analysis. What was happened in this? The message is addresses from circuit 1, circuit 4. It means, I feel weak, help bolster me up. If the answer comes back from circuit 3 and circuit 3, well, let's analyze the problem. There has been wrong address. Of course, this example is deliberately untypical, although not impossible. It is untypical because women traditionally are trained not to make this kind of mistake, to be emotionally sensitive, to be supportive, etc. It is much more likely statistically that this kind of wrong address will go the other way, husband to wife. That is, the wife signal help, and the husband on circuit 3 say, let's analyze the problem. I'm sorry. We have said that the imprint of the circuits contains a large element of accident within genetic parameters. Society everywhere, without understanding this theory, understand enough pragmatically about imprinting processes to attempt to program each individual for his or her assigned role. Hence, traditional girl rearing is different from traditional boy rearing, so that woman will have more secret to sensitivity. Again, woman's liberation, like modern child rearing, arrives only when we evolutionary ready to nearly ready for it. The traditional system work in traditional societies. Similarly, class structure, like the caste structure in insects hive, works to produce the right imprints in each class. The third circuits of the servile class or proletariat is imprinted chiefly for manual dexterity, while the same circuits in middle class or ruling class children is imprinted for verbal, mathematical, or other symbol using skills. Democracy has been less than a total success, and the intellectual half-shamed cynicism about democracy is justified to the extent that traditional society did not need could not use, and in many ways discourage the development of high verbal, rational skills in the majority of population. That is, concretely, most people are not encouraged by the very smart and are rather heavily programmed to be comparatively stupid. Such programming is what is needed to fit them into most traditional jobs. Their biosurvival circuitry work as well as that of most animals. Their emotional territorial circuitry is typically primate, and they have little third circuit mind to verbalize, rationalize with naturally. They usually vote for a charlatan who can activate primitive biosurvival fierce and territorial, patriotic, pugnacity. The intellectual looks at the dismal result and continues to believe in democracy only by an act of blind faith, similar to the way beliefs in Catholicism or communism or snake worship are maintained. Again, the traditional system works for traditional societies. A mass made of people who have intense curiosity about why Beethoven went in for string quartets, how to pronounce it, quartets, after the Ninth Symphony, of whether Kant really reviewed Hume satisfactorily, or what the latest quantum theories mean in relation to determinism and free will. It's not a mass that will easily to be led into dull, dehumanizing labor at traditional jobs. Why did Adlai Stevenson lose to Ike Eisenhower, George McGovern, and Tricky Dick Nixon, etc.? It was the wrong address problem again. Stevenson, McGovern, and other darlings of the intelligentsia were speaking of the third circuits, which is not very highly developed in most domesticated primates yet. Eisenhower in his fatherly way and Nixon in his bullying big brother way knew just how to push the right second circuit emotional territorial button to get a mob of primates to follow them. They were genetically programmed alpha males in ethological terms. Similarly, the moralist, the adult personality who has imprinted heavily ethical imperative on circuit 4 is often totally unable to communicate with the scientists or technologists. The moralists may even decide, many already have, that the scientists per se is inhuman. In fact, morals are fairly irrelevant to the third circuit's analytical mind, which is the brain function the average scientist has imprinted the most powerfully. The third circuit's the only morality is accuracy. The only immorality is sloppy thinking. Again, the rise in social conscience among scientists is happening only when it was evolutionarily necessary. That is happened after Hiroshima. If it doesn't seem to be happening widely enough and quickly enough, well, the same can be said also error. I think about modernizing education and child rearing, about women's liberation, about racism, etc. The rebellion against all the follies in the past is succeeding and will continue to succeed only as we evolve into a society which needs each human to function well on all circuits. We are moving with ever increasing speed into such a society.